Hello, music lovers of the world. Welcome to episode 42 of What Makes This Song Special, the show where every week I take a different song. I talk about what makes that song special to me. What does it remind me of in my life? Why is it an important song to me? I'll then tell a wee story about that. I'll talk about the song in question, a little bit about the singer and the singer's technique, and then I'll follow up with a little clickbait somewhere at the end of the video where you can listen to my version of the song. For this one, we're going to go back to March 2020. The world had just come crashing down for pretty much everyone on the planet. I don't think anyone needs me to explain why March 2020 was relevant, or around about that time in 2020. For all of us who have been on the planet for more than 3 years now, I think we'll all remember that time. For me personally, I was receiving emails by the dozen from brides and grooms who'd booked me and or the band to play at their wedding day, and who were panicking about the pandemic. People were postponing, cancelling, asking for deposits back that had already been spent. And I had to cancel or postpone around 150 weddings in the space of a few weeks. Bit scary. I had no idea whether the mortgage payments, car payments, utility bills were going to be possible. I was still coaching some singers online on Zoom and Skype. Thank you so much for those people who kept things afloat for me. But the problem was a lot of my vocal students who, like me, are professional singers and they sing for a living. They were in the same boat as me. They had all their gigs were cancelled. They weren't allowed to go out and sing and play. So they couldn't afford the vocal coach. Most of them anyway. So I was left like millions, billions of others, trying to think of other ways of making a living, filling out forms for grants, mortgage holidays, all those types of things that became, mortgage holidays. I mean, that wasn't even a term that I knew of before, pandemic. All of a sudden, these were terms that everybody was talking about on a daily basis. Amongst all of that, we were also hearing about thousands of people who were dying every day, and there was fear in the air. People were scared, angry, confused, frustrated, and yet, there was a sort of us against the world feeling about it, for me anyway. Me, my wife Linz, and my three amazing kids, who at the time would have been 8, 6, and 1, we got to spend every second together. Things that usually kept us too busy to see each other as much as I would have liked had disappeared. There was no work, there was no school, there were no kids clubs. It was the 5 of us working out how to navigate the madness that had come from nowhere, and we were becoming closer and closer as a result. The weather, unusually in Britain, an island not known for nice weather, was actually great for months, for most of 2020. The weather was brilliant, and it was probably the only saving grace. The kids were in the garden every day, playing with their next door neighbours on both sides. They made up games, they talked to each other over the fences. They were forced to be innovative and make use of more limited resources than usual, and this was a really nice thing to watch. It kind of took me back to my own childhood. We didn't always have computer games and things to fill our every moment, and television I suppose we had television programs, but not 1,000 channels. So a lot more time was spent when I was younger coming up with ideas for games, which sometimes quite sad that kids of today they probably don't get bored enough to come up with innovative ideas for games that they can play with each other. So this was an amazing thing to watch, and me and my wife, we were just winging it, as they say. We were just trying our best to keep the madness at bay, and we did things like usually we would always go out for like a coffee with the kids, and they would get like a juice or a cake or something at the weekends. That was a kind of thing that we did on a Saturday morning, which obviously get taken away. First world problems, of course, but yeah, those were things that we missed doing. So we made up a little sign called, it said the Italian Cafe, and we put it on the living room door. And then every week my wife would make a cake of some sorts, and we'd make coffees and hot chocolates for the kids, and we would have like a little morning, a Friday or Saturday morning together, played board games. We had a cinema night a couple of times where we got we made food or whatever, and we got bags of popcorn, and we watched a film with all the lights out, and made it like I think the kids made tickets, little fake cinema tickets, all these nice little things that we don't always get the time to do. We went cycling together, and we've got a pizza oven in our back garden, which became an obsession for me. I was trying to create the ultimate pizza dough. And pizza is something that my dad taught me to. My dad always makes amazing pizzas, so he taught me to do that many years ago. Something that my nonna taught him, and the recipe has always been and still is phenomenal. But I had time in my hands, and because it's a real pizza oven, it's a lot hotter than like a kitchen oven, and you can change the dough up a little bit. I'm going to get really geeky on pizza here. But yeah, I'd never had the excess time in my hands to really take pizza making to the next level. So that was another thing we did during lockdown, was making all these different pizza doughs, watching thousands of videos of Neapolitan pizzaioli, and trying to steal bits and pieces of ideas from them, different proving times and methods. And we were out in the garden a couple of times a week having pizza with the kids. We would hand some over the fence to our neighbours and stay up late chatting to them over the fence, or playing quizzes and having drinks and stuff that tried to, trying to find some normality in a world that had completely turned upside down. And we bonded with those people, in a way that they were already friends before, but we bonded with them in a way that, will never be sort of replicated or forgotten, because we experienced this moment in history together that we'll all still be talking about until the day we all leave this planet, I'm sure. So looking back now, there was something really beautiful and romantic about it. It took the rat race out of this crazy, mad, modern world that we live in, and made it like going back in time to a simpler time that I've only read about in books, that seems idyllic and peaceful. Maybe it wasn't. I'm sure there are pros and cons of every generation, but and I think it's easy for me to sit here and say that. Of course, it was horribly sad seeing the numbers of deaths rise every day. It was frustrating that the governments were feeding us all sorts of ridiculous information that didn't make any sense. And there are loads of conspiracies flying around that we won't even bother going into on this episode, and we'll keep it about music. But yeah, there's a lot of crazy stuff going around, whether it was information or just everything. Everything was crazy. Everything was just completely unusual. And I think everyone just had their own individual journey. Some people really hated it. Other people thrived on it. For me, there were pros and cons of it, and I think we were lucky that we had each other. We had great neighbours, a garden to keep us sane. I really feel obviously terrible for the folk who didn't have those liberties. For me, musically, it was tough, not obviously having the income that I have normally from as a gigging working musician. But it was a break from gigging that I probably needed. I'd been out playing gigs for 20 years by that point, and all of a sudden having weekends off was something that felt liberating. It was like not having to put on my game face all the time and play to hundreds of people. I missed performing, but it felt like a sort of reset button. I was just able to not completely relaxed with 3 kids and other things going on, but there was definitely a break from that was probably needed. During the week, I'd started to get some session vocal work from Sony Publishing and from some other songwriters, and which was just a really cool job. I was doing a lot more session work as a vocalist than I've ever really done before, putting down piano and vocal demos for famous singer-songwriters in the middle of a global pandemic, which was bizarre. And to keep me sane, because I still wanted that kind of immediate response that you get when you play a live gig, I started to do these these Facebook live gigs or YouTube live. I think it was Facebook or Instagram live gigs. And I would take requests from people, and it was like a faceless audience. It wasn't the same as playing, an actual gig. Nobody applauds at the end of songs, or maybe they do, but you can't hear them or see them. So it's just, you get comments coming up at the side saying that was great, or clapping hand emojis, but it's not really quite the same as hearing it or seeing a crowd respond to your playing and to your singing and performing. So it was a strange way to perform. I did it a few times, and the requests that I received that I didn't already know, I promised to learn them for the following week's gig. And 1 week, or maybe a couple of weeks in a row, there were 3 or 4 different girls that I know who kept asking for this song by Taylor Swift called All Too Well. I think Donna McDade and Debbie Eakins in particular need a shout out for those requests, because I think they just kept asking me, begging me to do a cover version of this song. So I promised I'd learn it for them, even though I had little interest in listening to a Taylor Swift song on repeat all week. But of course I was wrong to jump to conclusions, because actually, having listened to the song and then sort of her other songs would come on, if I didn't go back to repeat to listen to it. Taylor Swift's got some great songs. I fell in love with this song in particular, more so now in hindsight, because it reminds me of that time, which is why the song's special. But I'd almost forgotten about it, and then a couple of weeks ago I heard it, and I was just immediately transported back to 2020 and the pandemic, and it kind of made me quite emotional. It was like, just took me back to this sort of beauty and also trepidation of like uncertainty, like you get that kind of, so it's a strange one. But anyway, I learned the song, and I performed it on my Facebook Live, and it went down really nicely, and I kind of almost, as I say, forgot about that song. But because I'd listened to it on repeat for a couple of weeks at the start of the lockdown in preparation for that Facebook Live session, when I heard it again, it took me back, and it feels, I don't know if it's the same for anybody listening or watching, but the pandemic and the lockdown, it feels like a few months ago, but it also sort of feels like it could have been 10 years ago. It's so strange. It's like this almost, it's like this thing that almost never happened, like a dream, and yeah, it reminds you of all those horrible parts of it, like not being able to give your loved ones, like I couldn't give my mum and dad a hug. We're very huggy people, and having to talk outside to people, from meters away, and all the kind of daft stuff that you had to do through windows, and not knowing when it would end, and also becoming kind of almost scared of it ending, because you'd got used to this new world, and going back to normal life seemed like this kind of strange, scary thing that we'd forgotten, or maybe forgotten how to do. I don't know if that makes sense to anybody else, but as always, you can leave comments to your own experiences. But I say it carefully, because I'm aware that many people suffered, as I said before. A lot of people really suffered, and I really do think about those people and I really feel for people who suffered during the lockdown, and there were millions and millions of people who did. And a lot of people might hate me for saying this, but there was a part of the lockdown that I loved. For the reasons that I've already said. It just simplified things, it slowed things down. It made a lot of people realise that there's more important things to life than just working. And for me, it just gave me so much time with my wife, my kids. Not that I don't see them all the time anyway. I mean, I work from home most of the week, and when I'm out playing gigs, they're never that far away. It's not like I'm all over the world touring. But it was nice. There was something romantic about it that I think we'll all look back upon when we're older and have goods and bads to sort of reminisce over. So there's my thoughts on it. There's my wee story. The song All Too Well was released in 2012 by, of course, Taylor Swift, as we mentioned before. It was on her 4th studio album called Red, And it didn't do particularly well in the charts, but became a bit of a cult classic. And it seems to be a real fan favourite for the sort of Taylor Swift brigade and fan base. They all seem to really love this song for some reason. It's a real favourite. So Taylor Swift, as I always do like a little vocal breakdown for a minute at the end of each episode. So I'll talk about Taylor Swift. As a singer, she probably doesn't get the recognition or appreciation that she deserves. She's known as a great pop star, a great performer, a songwriter. I think she's kind of respected in the world of modern pop stars because she plays a guitar and she plays a piano and she sings and she writes her own songs, which is rare in the modern pop world. But she has got a really great voice. It's not really a big, powerful diva type voice that some of our musical peers have managed to, produce. But it's one of the it's not a voice that knocks you off your feet when you hear it for the first time. But she's so consistent. Her pitching is spot on. Her delivery's perfect. She conveys the emotion in her stories exactly how you would want them to be conveyed. A great storyteller's voice, country roots without being too twangy and cliche like most country singers can be. I'll get shot for that. But she rides that fine line between country, Americana, and also just being a total pop queen, which she most definitely is, probably the biggest of all the pop queens out there at the moment. So yeah, Taylor Swift definitely deserves some credit as a vocalist. I think she's very consistent. And yeah, she's got great voice, great range, very listenable, and she's got some great songs. And of course, this one in particular for me reminds me of that time in my life, which isn't. I didn't take you back as far as usual. Usually I go right back to childhood songs and things like that, or kind of early adulthood. A quite recent one this week. But I hope you enjoy it. You'll be able to click here or here in the next minute or so to listen to my version of All Too Well. Please leave me a like, subscribe, share it on your social media if you enjoy the song, if you enjoy the little story. And I'll be here next week with another song, another story. And thanks very much for tuning in.